Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erika Casupanan, the first Canadian to win Survivor. But before that, I was a Filipino immigrant and corporate perfectionist who felt doubted and overlooked. Now I'm here to prove that every journey, whether messy, beautiful, or unexpected, is worth celebrating. Every Monday, I bring you candid conversations and relatable pep talks with guests who've defied expectations. If you're ready to feel seen, celebrated, and empowered, you're in the right place. And here, I'm always happy to see you. Have you ever had one of those moments when everything felt stable? The road ahead looked clear. You were comfortable. And then poof, it was all gone? Well, that's what I'm talking about this week with Carlos Bustamante. Carlos is an icon in Canadian media. And if you're a late millennial or an early Gen Z who grew up in Canada, you definitely remember Carlos as the iconic host of The Zone, aka the after-school programming on YTV that every kid in Canada watched. After his stint at YTV, Carlos went on to work at Entertainment Tonight Canada, where we actually worked together. And then in 2023, unexpectedly, Entertainment Tonight Canada was canceled. And for the first time in 20 years, Carlos was out of the job. So how do you figure out what to do next? That's what we're talking about in this week's episode. But first, I love to start each episode by talking about something I was happy to see this week. And since we are talking about kids media, I have a very exciting update when it comes to kids TV. I got to act for the first time. So I had a role on the second season of this kids CBC show called Gangnam Project. Gangnam Project is the scripted show that follows teenagers as they're training to become K-pop idols. You know that I am a huge K-pop fan. And I actually interviewed the creator of Gangnam Project, Sarah Haas, on my podcast last year. Through that interview, we stayed connected and one thing led to another, and then I got this really fun role on the second season of the show. And this is so happy for me to see because it's proof that if you work hard, you follow your passions, and unapologetically like the things you like, the most beautiful surprises will unfold for you. Even the most unexpected ones. Like if you had told me that podcasting and talking about how much I loved K-pop would lead to an acting role, I would not have believed you. So this is a sign to trust yourself, pursue the road ahead even if it looks unclear, and to trust your passions. And this relates perfectly to my interview with Carlos. Because like I said before, Carlos had a stable gig for 20 years, and then he had to figure out, what do I want to do now? So in this episode, he talks about how you pick yourself up and figure out what to do when the road ahead is wide open. And spoiler alert, his advice involves taking the leap and choosing what feels good to you. We also talk about how Carlos quieted his inner critic, what it's like being an icon to a generation of Canadians, and what it's like to represent Filipinos on screen. If you know someone who's going through a major change, maybe they just got laid off, maybe they were forced to start a new chapter and they're not sure what to do, make sure you share this episode with them. So let's just get into it. Here is my interview with Carlos Bustamante. I hope you enjoy it. My friend, thank you for joining the podcast.
Happy to see you.
I am happy to see you. Well, this podcast, we talk to people who have been overlooked or underestimated in some way. So I want to know, have you felt underestimated? And if you have, can you describe a moment when you felt underestimated?
Okay. I was thinking about this. The feeling of being underestimated, I think, is something I haven't legitimately had since I was a young person. So since I was like in elementary school, high school, proving myself to peers and teachers. Beyond that point, it's always been pressure I've put on myself. So I haven't had the idea, I haven't had even the thought about, like, say, what you thought about me in a particular scenario. It's always been about how I do based on my standard.
That is so interesting. So you don't have a specific example of this person made me feel something. Instead, it's all the script in Carlos's head. Oh, that's even worse though. That means the critic is always there.
The critic is always there, but it's you know what, it might have a lot to do with obviously the line of work I've been in for my whole professional career. And even before that, I mean, I've always been in entertainment since I was about 9. So dancing and competing and then working as a dancer and then theater and then all that stuff. So that sort of, what you're calling the self-critic, becomes like very, very developed. But it's almost like another audience member that's kind of keeping track in a way of how things are going. So in every moment that you're performing for an audience, sometimes a perceived audience, oftentimes a very real audience, you have a part of you that is making sure that, certain things are in check, right? Are you standing up straight enough? Are you doing this? Like all those little things. So so when it comes to feeling underestimated, I don't think I've really paid attention to whether or not someone was looking at me going, this guy can't do it. It's because I've been like, oh, is there a task I have to do? Okay, I'm going to do it up to this standard. I'm going to bring the best that I can. Yeah.
So potentially you're the one underestimating yourself sometimes.
You know what? Very, very much so.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true of, I don't know, a lot of us might do that. It's funny, I was talking to someone, so the podcast Sangeeta and I are doing, Click and Tell, we had an episode this morning, and we were chatting with WWE wrestler, United States Women's Champion, Chelsea Green. And her inner voice, she described as being like, essentially very positive, like she doesn't really believe that she can be stopped. And that's a purposeful thing. I'm going to do this. I want to do this. And I think that there's a part of some of us, and I have this, where I want to have that big voice. And there is that in me on some days. But then other days, there's the voice of like, yeah, man, I don't know. Right? A little bit of like, I don't know, you sure? Okay. And then that, it's a little bit of a check. And I go, no, I want to. I can. I'm going to. But there is a check in place going, are you sure? Yeah.
But you don't see this other voice then as like a villain. You see them as like just someone checking to make sure. It's kind of, the person who like when you're on a plane, someone making sure that your seatbelt is buckled in. Do you see it more as a check like that?
Yeah, it's been an evolutionary process.
Oh.
Quite frankly. It did used to be more of a, when people say like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Like it did used to be a bit of a, who do you think you are doing this kind of thing, which was more self-imposed. I didn't get that from like my parents or anything like that. That was kind of more self-imposed. But then it's evolved more to be that check, that attendant to go, okay, you want to do that? Have you thought about this? And I go, I haven't thought about that. Sometimes it's like, I haven't thought about that. Great. Other times I'll be like, I don't need to think about that. Get that out of my face. I need to just move ahead. So it's there for sure.
I like this reframing of that voice, right? Because I think some people hear that voice and then they get so down on themselves, or they see this voice as something they need to swat away. But when you reframe it as you're simply the attendant doing all the last checks before you do something that could be uncomfortable, that could be a risk, I think that's a much more healthy way to have a conversation with that voice.
I agree. And sometimes, you know what? I think that for the way I would like it to go, and the voice is there, but for the way that I would like to go, I want it to get smaller and smaller. Because so ages ago, I remember being at YTV. I had a makeup artist friend who, her dream was to travel the world for a living. And this was like early sort of vlogging days. Her husband and she both had really good careers here, both in entertainment, film industry. And she told this story about, they had purchased a house and she got in there and she looked around and broke down and went, this is going to be the rest of my life. I don't want this. And then they flipped and decided to go pursue their dream. And we had a conversation about the idea of calculated risks. And this is really what that little attendant voice is. The idea about a calculated risk. And she was like, I don't like the idea of a calculated risk. Because a calculated risk gives you an out.
Oh.
So if you make it the only option, then you have to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. I like that. So now you're just going for it. You're just doing it.
So that's the evolution. I'm on my path to there. I'm confident that I'll get there.
Yes.
But, the voice that is a little bit doubtful is still there. And there are ways certainly that it can be healthy and helpful, but other ways where I'm just like, get out. I don't want you here. I don't need you here.
Well, I mean, you've had quite the career, right? So is it this voice has become smaller and has changed as you've gone on in your career?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that.
It comes with experience.
I love that. Well, I want to ask you a bit about your career because you are iconic. I think that there's a generation of Canadians and to them, you are iconic. Is that something that sinks into you?
So kind of. I don't speak to myself in those terms.
You're not like, I am an icon.
And you know what? Fair play to anybody that does, because like, great, good for you. I don't speak to myself or about myself in those terms. I think mostly because I'm not putting on a character. Like if it was a character that was iconic, then that could be free to do that. But because who I've been for my audience has more or less been me, then the actual conversation I have is that I am known, like I'm a known person, and the people that know me, for the most part, are friendly and they like the experience that we shared together when they were whatever age they were that I was on their TV or wherever. And the actual in-person experience I get with people is genuinely very, very good. So I understand what you're saying. Absolutely. And it's very, very nice to hear. But that's the way that I frame it for myself. It's like, yeah, I'm there. And also, I have to be able to verbalize it and frame it in a particular way because I do have 2 kids.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when we are encountering people out on Queen Street or out wherever that want to stop and have a chat, or they want to be very complimentary because they really enjoyed, their time watching YTV when they were younger, I have to be able to frame that for my kids and not make it seem like, I don't want to make it seem like it's something that's like really huge and special, if that makes sense. It's just kind of like, yep, this is the day to day. That was a person that was very, very friendly. We had some things to say. It was nice to get to know them a little bit too. Certainly when they were younger, I had to say to them, like, this will happen. Like, this will happen a bit.
I want to paint a picture for the audience because a few years ago, we both did speeches at your high school on the same day. They had a conference. They invited in all of these speakers. Carlos, you were the last speaker of the day. You were the grand finale. And the picture I want to paint is Carlos gets up on stage, gymnasium full of high school students. The crowd goes wild.
It's so fun.
It was so nice. Cute. It was so cute to see. And I think it was the mixture of this was an alumni. This was someone who walked these halls. And also you were somebody that people in Canada from a specific generation watched every day after school. I am a little older than someone who would have grown up watching you on TV, which was probably like a comforting thing, right? I'm sure you probably get a lot of people who say you're part of my childhood. I had the generation of Zone hosts before you.
Yeah.
But I know what it was like to come home and I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch PJ Phil now, or I'm going to watch PJ
100%.
Katie.
Yeah.
And I know that you say you want to frame it for your kids as something that's not big and special. But I think it is pretty big and special that you had this impact on people. How do you process when people come up to you and say, I watched you every day as a kid. You were like my best friend when I was a kid.
Yeah, I don't want to take that away from anybody, of course, right? Like when I say I don't want to frame it as big and special, it's specifically like for my kids that I don't want them to think about their dad being anything more important than being their dad. That's what I want for them. But when I meet someone who says that to me, I want to give them the space. They didn't expect to see me somewhere, or maybe they did expect to see me somewhere, and they've been thinking about how do I talk to a person? How do I talk to this person? They absolutely deserve the space to be able to express to me what that meant for good or ill, right? And I like to share time with people when they do that. It's kind of like, it's a special moment for me. What we did before social media with The Zone, with YTV, was that, we were making this, we didn't call it content, but we were making this content that went on air every single day in bite-sized portions, but we didn't really have the interaction. So there wasn't an opportunity like there is now, like for me to message you and be like, yo, that was amazing, haha, hilarious, fire, whatever. Back in the day when you were younger and you're watching something, you just held it into yourself. You reacted the way that you reacted. Maybe you talked to your friends about it and that was it. So if it's been like 20 years or 15 years and someone wants to say to me, I really loved when you did whatever, I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. I probably don't even remember it, but tell me about it. And then I want to also like know a little bit about you, about your experience and who are you and what are you doing and is life good for you?
When you talk to these people and ask them about their lives and you hear about the impact that you had on them, have you learned anything? Was there a lesson that you got from one of these interactions?
From early in the process, I always wanted it to be something that was shared. I never thought of it as a status idea. And for those listening, I meant like celebrity status being above and a regular person status being below. I know what it's like to run into someone that you're a huge fan of and not know what to say and like be shy and want to tell them all the things you love about what they've done, but be tongue-tied. Like that was me when I was younger. So, I've always wanted it to be like a shared experience. And I think I've learned really about, some people aren't prepared to tell you about themselves. They're just prepared to say, I love this, or thank you for that. And so maybe not sort of commandeering the experience so much and just kind of letting it be what it is. It is really interesting, the variety of interactions you get. I was walking down Islington today and a dude from his car was like, yo, and he wanted to fist bump me. And I was like, I would, but there's a big snowman. Like I can't climb over the snow, but right? Like air fist bump. Like that's like a little thing. And then it was a few days ago, someone came to my door trying to whatever, like sell something. And then we're like, ugh. And then so we had like a little bit of a back and forth.
Yeah.
And it was great. So letting those moments be what they're going to be is really it. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's really good advice for me to hear because I was, a normal person. I mean, we're all normal, but, a normal person with just a regular 9-to-5 job. And then I go on Survivor. It's the pandemic. And then the show airs. Things start opening up. And then I had the experience of people just coming up to me all the time. Even I would walk down the street and 18-wheeler trucks would honk their horn and yell my name out the window. It's calmed down a bit, but not as much as I thought it would after a few years. But I'm still trying to figure out how to manage each interaction, right? Because I think that early on, I was like, I have to be super generous and make this the best moment of somebody's life. Now I'm figuring out how can I be kind, but then still be a bit boundaried. So sometimes if I'm in my sweatpants going to the grocery store and someone asks to take a photo, I'm like, yes, but can you not put it on social media? They're like, I'm just going to send it to my family. I'm like, that is totally fine.
Yes.
But what advice do you have for somebody who, like me, who is still trying to figure that out?
I think it's wild what happened to you. I think it's kind of amazing. And especially the way that it went. You just described it. You had a path that you thought you were going to be on, which got flipped upside down. And so it's not like you necessarily were mentally preparing yourself from any particular younger age to be in these scenarios. They're kind of thrust upon you. I think it's very important to draw your boundaries. It's funny to draw the parallel between the very obvious parallel of someone coming up to you and recognizing you and wanting to steal a little bit of your time or tell you something really cool or tell you about their experience with you, which happens the same thing with me. But it is, when you break it down, actually quite different. Where it's coming from my audience, is from a very different place. Coming from when they were younger and the things they might want to tell me versus what someone who knows you from just a couple years back on a phenomenon of a show, global phenomenon of a show, has to say about their experience with you. So there are things I could say to you, but I really think it's your journey. Like it really is your path and your way to figure that out. I think boundaries are very important. Like certainly, I had been in situations where, especially with my kids, I'm protective of them, obviously. And so, if the kids are there, there's a boundary that I draw. If I'm in a bit of a rush, there's a little bit of a boundary that I draw. I've done the thing where, and sorry for anyone that I've done this to, but I haven't heard you. Because I have to go. I'm doing things. And so you make boundaries for yourself so that you can kind of protect your own while also maybe giving them a little bit of something. Because really, a lot of times most people, and thank goodness for this, want to just have the moment and be able to tell a cool story. They don't want to give you their life story or drag you down with a bunch of stuff. Like it's usually the moment and the story for their friends and their loved ones. So if that's something that you can give them on that day, sweet.
That's the thing. I think especially in Canada, nobody wants to ask too much of you, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's always like one or two people, but for the most part, people just want to be like, hey, photo, I want to tell you how cool it was. It's cool to see you. Have a good day. I think that everybody listening who wants to approach someone like that, I think that that's the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, as someone on the receiving end, it's a really nice way to be treated, quite honestly. It's a very privileged thing to have people look at you and want to share a positive moment with you versus the opposite.
Yeah.
Or even just neutral. Like neutral's great, opposites, whatever. But that whole positive thing is like a real blessing.
Yeah. It is. It is a blessing in disguise. I think once I get used to it, I'm like, wow. It is cool that it has been a few years and people are still coming.
Like how many years has it been for you?
4.
Yeah, okay.
4
years. 4 years. And so I think that Survivor fans, for the rest of their lives, who saw you win, you will get that for probably the rest of your life, right? That will be the point of contact with you until the next thing that they are a fan of. But that will be a point of contact for you for the people that saw the show. And that's something that you're going to, it's healthy for you, it seems. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like it's like a burden, but it's something that you're going to be, oh yeah. And it's cool because you can tell them, imagine being like 60 and someone comes up to you and is like, oh, I love doing you. And you can, you're free to still tell them a cool story about it, right? Like that's great.
Oh, yeah, I have the anecdotes ready for the people.
100%, yeah.
Well, you spent a long time at YTV, and then you made the switch to entertainment reporting at Entertainment Tonight Canada. So what was that like for you? Was it hard to get people to see you in a different light? Was it hard for you even to see yourself in a different light?
It was a fun challenge to take on. It wasn't honestly, it was a tonal shift in a way. It was almost just like the shift from speaking at a volume and an energy. This is very technical, but speaking on camera at a volume and an energy and taking it to another volume and a different energy. Always very comfortable on camera because I'd been doing it for so long. At that point, YTV I had been doing for like 15 or 16 years before I started ET Canada, and I was doing them simultaneously for a while. But shifting over was a really positive experience for me. The team was amazing. I loved the team at ET Canada. And they all made it very, very easy for me to hop in and just kind of do the work that I needed to do. And back to the first question of being underestimated and how you approach those things, I never thought in my mind about what anybody else was thinking about how I was doing something other than technically. Do you need me to hit this mark? Am I speaking clearly enough? All those things. As far as the audience goes, it was an interesting time because I phased out around the time when I think the audience that I was traditionally accustomed to speaking to really wholeheartedly made the jump over to digital, right? From linear television. So the primary audience was now watching more stuff on YouTube than they had been previously in my career. And social media had started to really pick up around in that year that I started ET Canada, it was like 2016 or 2017. So it was already rolling. And there were things that people were consuming there habitually different than they were doing before. So the audience that I basically kind of like grew out of it as an audience grew out of it. And so the funny thing would happen where I would get people hopping onto my comments on Instagram if I'd posted like an outfit of the day or something. And I remember those. And
I still do those.
Right. And they would go, yo, where have you been? Kind of saying, oh, it's crazy. I haven't seen you in however long. So that audience wasn't the audience that was going to be watching ET Canada.
Yeah.
The people that came up to me that were aware of both were like, oh my gosh, I loved you on YTV and my mom loves watching you on ET Canada. That was typically the trend.
Yeah.
That's how it went. And so it would be a different audience. Like if I'd be at at the mall, I remember being at Pearson, sitting down for breakfast, and a lady walked over with her bags and she goes, I just want to say, you and Cheryl and Sangeeta on ET Canada, we never miss an episode,
Oh.
And she was this lady going to a conference in Calgary. And she was like, and my kids used to watch you on YTV. And that was how I was like, okay, this is how it's going to go. It's a very split audience. It actually allowed me the freedom to be, in a way, new for a group of people and just kind of like do what I needed to do for that show. But I could still bring my experience. I could still bring some of what that spirit was that I had at YTV to my work at ET Canada.
So you're saying that you were iconic to both the children and to their parents.
Maybe, I don't know, listen. You'll have to ask them. You'll have to ask the parents.
But that's fun. So that's less of a personal pivot, but more so you're one person and then you're just being reintroduced to a different audience.
In a way,
Yeah.
It was cool because I got to, as a reporter on ET Canada, what would happen a lot, and you know this from being in studio, is we would have, say, artists who were in their 20s and it's their first album or their second album or whatever, and they knew me from when they were younger. So
Wow.
There was already a bit of a shorthand. There was already a bit of a connection that we got to have when I started. I would do red carpets for certain events, maybe youth-oriented events where there would be some big celebrities at. I remember the first carpet I did was for ET Canada was at the Scotiabank Arena. And like tons of celebrities were there for that. But the audience was all high schoolers and they were like cheering for me
Wow.
to come over. And so the producer on that, shout out Will, was like, make sure you get that on camera. Because I was still sort of auditioning for ET Canada at the time. Make sure you get that on camera. And that was a really nice, like, thanks everybody. Thanks everyone in the audience for that one. But a really nice moment to remember that, oh yeah, I'm something to these people. I don't think outside of that sometimes. Like I'm focused on what I have to do.
Yeah.
So to hear that was like, oh, right. Awesome.
When I was at ET Canada, I remember one week I posted a vlog of what it's like to be a correspondent at ET Canada. So I posted it. And actually, one of the major trends in the comments and the DMs were, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're working with Carlos from The Zone. My mind is blown. This is like my two worlds colliding. So,
two worlds colliding.
Yes,
Love it.
like you really still, carry so much weight for so many people.
Thanks.
And then another trend in the comments I saw, people were saying, these are my two Filipinos on TV in Canada.
Yes.
I'm like, that is
Get
awesome.
it,
Because
right?
you were
Feels
truly
good.
one of the only Filipino people that I know that my siblings were seeing on TV for a long time. Do you feel like there was a lot of pressure or a lot of responsibility being one of the only Filipinos on TV?
It's funny because when I stepped into the role, the guy I grew up watching was Filipino.
Yes, PJ Phil.
So PJ Phil. Shout out PJ
Yes.
Phil. a total gem of a person. So when I was younger, there was this thing that would happen a lot in my house. We'd be watching some form of media or listening to something, and then my brother would go, yo, you know that guy's Filipino, eh? I'd be like, what? Like
Yes,
Lou Diamond
yes.
Phillips, what? He's Filipino? And then so Phil was like, yeah, he's Filipino. And he would talk to his Lola on the phone, and he was just this figure of like a really cool, laid back, chill dude who happened to be on TV, funny, all these things. And so when it was, in a way, when it was like my turn, I unofficially thought of it as like carrying a mantle. I was like, okay, so I'm going to be the second Filipino guy to do this. It didn't feel much like pressure as far as my Filipino identity went or representing people. I just felt like I had to do a good job for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I got to include some of my experience as a Filipino person on the show with some characters and whatnot. I never felt like I had to represent in a particular way. And I think maybe I was a bit lucky that way. No one was saying to me, and again, no social media, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So no one was saying to me, you're doing it wrong, or you have to do this, or whatever. I was like, I just got to express and make cool stuff and enjoy it.
I find that there's not really a singular way to represent. I think I remember even someone coming up and talking to me and being like, oh, it's so cool that you're Filipino. Do you speak Tagalog? And I understand Tagalog. My family speaks to me in Tagalog. I can watch a movie. I can listen to music.
That's more than me.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
But I still felt like insecure about it. And this person was like, no, but that's real. That's like really a Filipino-Canadian experience. Did you meet any audience members, whether at YTV or at ET Canada, who gave you perspective about what it's like to represent Filipinos?
Do you know, you must know Russell, the artist, right? Amazing singer, rapper, right?
Yes.
Multidisciplinary artist. Again, shout out Russell. I'm just shouting out everybody today, but seriously, shout
All
out
the
Russell.
Filipinos.
Yes. So back in the day, Russell went by D Pride as a rapper. And we had him on as a guest because we were just like so impressed with his abilities. He brought his whole family. His whole family came to studio, and his parents treated me like I was family.
Oh, very Filipino.
And very Filipino. And they were like, we're so proud of you. Everyone's so proud of you. Obviously, like, you're welcome to the house anytime, all that stuff. But it was one of the first times, and it wasn't the first time, but it really sticks out in my head because it was such a beautiful, like, day that day. But it stuck out as like, yeah, you are something for the people that recognize that you're Filipino. Because that's another thing. Do they recognize you're Filipino? And you do, in that dimension, mean something very specifically to your own group of people and not just, quote unquote, just like the country as a whole. And so I remember thinking to myself then, like, wow, this is like, I know that Filipinos go hard for each other. Like when someone's in media, they go hard in the paint and they want to celebrate you, right? And if they recognize you and they notice it, I would get notes from people in the Philippines being like, yo, I shared that you did this interview with so-and-so and now everybody wants to know who the, like, people that don't get our programming here that would be interested in it because there's that connection. Just being Filipino, I remember it. The way that I remember it growing up, being Filipino was a link to somebody else. Just to be able to say you were. Because maybe it was because of the scarcity. Maybe it was because of how spread apart we were. Like you said, the experiences and specificity were different from family to family. And you could see in different communities how, I remember growing up and thinking this, different communities you could see how like cohesive things were. Where I grew up, we weren't connected really to a broader Filipino community outside of our family. So like cousins that lived in different cities here and there. I remember going and visiting a cousin once in Mississauga and like all our friends were Filipino. And I was like, yo, what? I was really young. I remember being like 12 or 13. I'm sure this is going to be a part of the conversation that we were going to have, but I'm going to jump to it right away. Being doubted immediately because I didn't look like them.
Right.
And so they were like, you're not Filipino. You're Filipino. And I remember being like, I have to justify myself somehow. And it was very, very strange to me. So, going back to that, aside from that experience when I was younger, which was really eye-opening for me, I've always looked at the fact that we can claim that ancestry together as a link, as a good way to just get started, right? Because I found as a broad community across the entire country, people are open that way. Oh, you are? Do you know so-and-so?
Yeah.
Right?
And you probably do.
And you probably do. So, yeah.
I feel like you unlocked a memory for me When I was in university, I remember going to Clubs Week. I was in first year. There was a Filipino club. I'm like, oh, maybe I should join the Filipino club. Because I grew up in a city where we were one of the only Filipino kids in our school. I had a debutante ball or a debut, all the Filipinos know, and it was full of white people who thought it was so cool. And then I would go visit my cousins in Mississauga, and I'm like, oh, there's actual other Filipino kids at the debut. When I was at university, I'm like, maybe I'll join the Filipino club. So I go up, I start talking to the people at the Filipino club, and they were like, wow, your accent is so cute and so white. And I'm like, I'm not joining the club.
Right.
And I turned around and left and just like never associated with the culture again. And I mean, I don't blame these people. We're like, insecure people in our teens. It's fine.
100%.
I think that always made me think, oh my gosh, I don't speak the language enough. I don't sound Filipino enough. But really, as long as we are, it's enough.
Well, it's interesting. And I didn't know that we had that kind of shared experience. But when you're someone who is looking for a connection, finding people that maybe aren't necessarily looking for that connection, that's when it hurts. It like hits harder because you're like, wait, but I finally found you. You don't want me?
Yeah.
Right.
But I feel like I don't have that experience anymore.
No,
Everyone I know now who's Filipino, it's like the number of people who have reached out to me and who I've reached out, and I was simply like, hey, I'm Filipino. And I'm like, great, let's have a conversation and see what we can do. It's very different now.
Yes. I am in love with the community here. I have a cousin who, she was coming from Manila. She is an art restorer. And so she had pieces that she had restored that were at the Pasita Abad exhibit at the AGO.
Yes.
And we were walking through it together, and she was telling me about all the art and which ones she worked on. And we were talking about the community here, and I was trying to explain to her how interconnected everything is. Not too dissimilar, I think, from stories that I've heard from back home where you know someone who knows someone who knows someone, and you kind of like, there's chismes and everybody, everybody knows each other. But here, I think because of the separation from being there and the desire to prove ourselves as a cultural force, you want to invite people in because we are going to make this thing happen together. And that's the experience that I've found here. It's like, yes, musicians, yes, cooks, chefs, yes. What are you going to do? You want to work on that together? You know someone that's a cameraman? Bring them in. Right? Let's all build this up together. And it's happening, and it's been happening. And I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah. There's no point in being in competition with each other.
Yeah.
There's actually enough room and more room when we all do everything together.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about ET Canada because we know that, was it last year now? The year
23.
before? 23. In 2023, you found out that ET Canada was canceled. So what goes through your mind when you get that news? What's the first thing you thought? And then what was the next thing you thought?
I was like, dude, we just threw the best party.
Yes.
What?
It was a good party.
We literally last week we threw the best party, and now it was our season 19 party for TIFF, whatever.
Oh yes, it was a great party. I was there.
Party. Yeah, no, jokes aside, I remember the first thing I thought was, how am I going to pay the bills now? Like, what's next? How am I going to feed my family? Essentially was the first thought. And then the second thought, which came very, very quickly, was I can do whatever I want now. Now I can do whatever I want. I had been with the company, and I had loved my time with the company, with Chorus, since I was about 20. So when I started on YTV, I was pretty young, 20-ish years old. And I had a lot of fun there, formed a lot of relationships, made a lot of friends, got all my work experience from that. So learned the ropes of media, learned the ropes of how to be on TV, learned the ropes of how to produce, all that stuff there. But the other side of it was, the trade-off that you sometimes make with a large business, with a large company like that is like, okay, we're working together to make these things happen, but you're exclusive to us. So that meant that in my younger days when I was still dancing and I was still doing commercials and I was still trying to do theater, it was a real process to get a call for an audition on a Thursday. They're shooting the thing on the next Tuesday. Am I allowed to do this? Having to get permission to do all these things. There was a point, however many years in, 3-4 years in, where I kind of stopped because I was like, it's too much work, too much hassle. And I keep telling my agent no, because I can't. And so I had gotten accustomed to that. And then when it happened, when they told us, I was like, there's 10 bajillion things I've been waiting 20 years to do.
Oh.
And I've had a really great career and I've been very comfortable and I've loved it. Every day I found something to love about it. But now I get to explore what it means to do all those other things and to take risks and to see who I am and to see my family more and to spend time with my kids and to drive them to and from the things that they do and to sit down for every dinner, which I didn't get a chance to do. It just rarely happens, right? I was driving home that day and all of us were sort of texting and calling each other. Well, we're calling each other, I was driving. And I remember talking to Sangeeta on the phone. And we were having this conversation about it, making light, like joking about a bunch of different things. And she just was like, what do we do now? Like, what do we do? And I just said, whatever you want. We're free now. You can do whatever you want. And that is what I held on to when I felt like I was floating. Like I was like, I'm 20 years of having a gig. It's a really great run. And I'm very fortunate to have had it. And I always knew that. Like, I'm really blessed to be able to be in this position. The first few months, I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? Yeah. And I would be talking to different friends who had gone through similar experiences. And unfortunately, for a big business like that, they do rounds of layoffs, right? So friends that you knew you're no longer working with. And so I was talking to a lot of people. And a lot of them would say, take the time to enjoy your life as a human being and not like a personality, because you have a bit of time. Really figure out what you want to do and how you want to spend your time, not who needs your time, how you want to spend your time. And that was the process. That's how it went. Yeah.
I mean, I know from switching from having a full-time job to then working for yourself, when you are in the driver's seat, you have to figure out what's the criteria for me to figure out, do I go in this direction or this direction? And you really have to ask yourself those questions about what's important to me, what do I want to contribute? So I know that now you're working on Click and Tell. That's one of your projects. Look it up. I'll link it in the show notes.
Click and Tell, baby. Yes.
How did you decide that that was a project that you wanted to develop? Now that you have all this freedom for the first time in years, how did you decide that was it?
It's funny, Sangeeta and I had been just like chatting, and I think it was like spring, must have been like around April or March or something last year. We were just joking about what could come next, where we want to go, discussing the things we actually wanted to do, like things we had pursued and then put off sort of thing, or pursued and found roadblocks in. And we were just talking about new media and exploring what those things would be like. And I can't remember who said it first. I think she might have said, do you just want to start a podcast? And I was like, yep. Just like, yep, that'd be great. Like, you're cool.
Podcasting's great.
Podcasting is great. But like, to find someone who you know is a pro, who you know you get along with, who you can work with, who really wants to make something work. We had that already. We knew that about each other. And so we just went, okay, well, how do we do it? And we literally just, from that day, just went, okay, I guess we're going to start. And we figured it out, and we found our people, and we found a team, and we just started to figure things out along the way. And just, we knew what we knew how to do. Like, we knew how to get in touch with people. We knew how to sit and talk to people. We knew how to do our, a little bit of marketing here and there for what we need to be promoting. But we were open to learning and ready to just jump in 2 feet.
I love how over the years we've seen so many iterations of Carlos, right? The dancer Carlos, YTV Carlos,
right.
ET Canada Carlos. And now you're at this new chapter where you get to really write the story. What is your advice for somebody who is at the start of a new chapter? Maybe it's not a chapter that they wanted to open, but they're there anyways.
Yeah.
What's your advice for someone there?
So the world keeps moving, right? It doesn't stop because the thing that you were doing stopped. It keeps going. You have to keep going. So however long it takes you to figure out what it is that you want to dive into, when you do it, just jump. Like, do it. Sometimes it's not the thing that you thought. You can't go from 0 to 100 on the ultimate dream of yours. But if it's something that moves you in that direction, then do it. If you can envision something that you can envision doing every day and go 60-40, 70-30, I know that I'm going to have good days doing this thing. I can contribute. It uses a skill set that I like using. I only have so much time in a day, in a week, in a year. How am I going to spend it? Because it's going to fulfill me and it's going to give other people, we're in media, so that's something that we consider, but it's going to fulfill things that I want to fulfill out of life. Tell your little voice,
Yes, the voice.
that says I don't know, to just like shut up for a while and focus on diving in. And you don't know where it's going to take you because action begets action. So the longer that you sit, the less you're going to want to take action. I'm not saying be completely impulsive, but follow the instinct that brings you, for lack of a better term, the instinct that brings you joy or something that you're hungry for. And you will figure it out. Be open to it and be prepared for it. Yeah.
I think that the best things come that you don't expect, but you just have to be in motion. You have to be talking to people. You have to be moving. You have to be doing something because that gives space for life to surprise you.
1,000%. Yeah. Yeah. And life will give you like a lot of great surprises if you're open to it.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, well, Carlos, it was so nice to chat with you today.
Is that it? Are we done already?
I know. I mean, well, this is your moment. You can plug. Can you tell everybody about Click and Tell?
Yes.
Can you tell everybody about everything you're working on and where to find you?
Okay, so find me I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm on TikTok a little bit. Haven't been there in a while. Sorry, everybody. But it's
Same.
Lowspot. Yeah, at LOSBOT, Lowspot. Click and Tell is our weekly podcast / interview show. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on all the podcasts. Sangeeta Patel and I sit down with people that we think are making moves that are really interesting, people that we just want to get to know. And we journey through their story using media and pictures that they've already shared. So we talk to them, we get them to pull a photo, and we just dive into that story, whatever that is. We release new episodes every single Wednesday. When is this going to be on?
On a Monday.
On a Monday. So in 2 days, set your watch. Usually on the Tuesday night, we post the first clip of what the full episode is going to be on the Wednesday. So Click and Tell Show on socials. You can find it off of my Instagram as well. And I've got another project in the works, but I can't really talk about it. But I'm very, very excited. It's going to be amazing, and you guys are going to love it. But it'll be a little ways down the road. But there's something else in store too.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Carlos, salamat. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Carlos, for sharing your positivity and your wisdom. And if you know someone going through a major change, make sure you share this episode with them so they can benefit from Carlos's wisdom too. And hey, I still love to end each episode by answering a listener question. So if you have any questions for me, make sure you share them. The podcast is on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. It's at Happy to See Me Pod. Thank you so much for spending a bit of time with me this week, and I will be happy to see you next Monday.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Sonar Network.
Sonar!